Replacement Killers.
The Replacement Killers stars Chow Yun-fat in his Hollywood debut as John Lee, a man who owes a debt to notorious crime boss Terrence Wei, played by Kenneth Zhang. His manner of payment is in the form of assassinating people for Wei's triad. Wei's son has just been killed in a botched drug bust by LA police detective Zhikov, played by Michael Rooker. In retaliation, Wei orders John to assassinate Zhikov's 7-year-old son right in front of him. However, John comes down with a spontaneous case of conscience and refuses. The next morning, when he visits identity forger Meg Coburn, played by Mira Sorvino, to get a passport so he can GTFO, the two find themselves ducking gunfire from Wei's goons. With very few options, the two team up to fashion John a passport and get him to his family in China before Wei's hit squad beats him there. In bringing Chow Yun-fat to American films, it only makes sense to put him in a genre film that most fans of Hong Kong cinema would be familiar with. If the international appeal of a man who has starred in such action gems as A Better Tomorrow, The Killer, and Hard Boiled has reached enough of a fever pitch that you want to bring him to Hollywood to introduce him to more filmgoers, why wouldn't you put him in a film reminiscent of his John Woo gems? Fun fact, John Woo serves as an executive producer on this film. Mind you, this was the late 90s, when literally everyone was trying to copy Woo's cinematic aesthetic. And while The Replacement Killers reeks of, look at me, I can make heroic bloodshed action movies too, that doesn't necessarily make it bad. One thing I give director Antoine Fuqua credit for, he certainly gets how movies work. What I mean by that is simple. Most directors, when transitioning from directing music videos to directing film, tend to stay in music video mode. For example, if you're watching an action movie and there's goofy camera angles or rapid-fire editing, usually it's because the director takes the fast-paced editing and experimental cinematography that applies to music videos and applies them to film. As a result, you end up with action set pieces that are more disjointed than the theatrical cut of Justice League. That is not the case with The Replacement Killers. Every frame feels like a proper movie, every shot, whether stationary or one of the numerous Steadicam shots, feels like it belongs in a movie. While the color palette at times feels a hair too drab, there are moments where the color truly heightens the film world, albeit not to the extent of John Wick. Unlike many Woo copycat films, this one doesn't attempt to only replicate the lone badass in a dark suit mowing down waves of faceless goons in slow-mo with just 2 Berettas in hand, though it has plenty of that as well. From a nightclub to an apartment building, to a car wash, to an arcade, to a movie theater, to a Chinatown alley, each set piece is a self-contained story that serves to drive the overall film's narrative forward. It's not just action for the sake of having action. Unlike, say, the Taken series, the camera's pulled back and the editing is done well enough so that you can marvel at Chow Yun-fat being Chow Yun-fat. Even with the slow-mo being kept to a minimum, the action flows smooth, silk smooth. Just don't expect it to be nearly as bloody as John Woo's Hong Kong stuff. Add to that Chow Yun-fat performing most of his own stunts, something he became accustomed to during his John Woo days, and there's only one instance of CGI usage. Just one. Now, there is a director's cut, and I recommend you watch that version for one simple reason: character. In the theatrical version, there's very little character development, as every scene in between an action scene is just filler. In the director's cut, however, there are little moments of character, of John and Meg gradually opening up to each other about their pasts and what drives them. There's even slight hints at a romance between the two that can never be realized, and it further fleshes them out and feeds into those themes of honor and friendship so prevalent in Woo's films. So why was it cut out? Because test audiences didn't get the relationship between the two, so the studio decided to cut all the little scenes down and tighten up the movie.
You are a moron. Aye, aye, sir.
For any aspiring filmmakers out there, never let this happen. Always fight for your movie, as a handful of random schmucks does not represent every single filmgoer on planet Earth. While the theatrical cut is entertaining, the director's cut feels more like a complete movie. Finally, let's rap about the cast. Chow-Yun-Fat feels right at home as John Lee, the steely-eyed badass assassin with a moral code. Even though he was still learning English at the time, it comes out flawlessly in his performance, even though most of his dialogue is in short sentences. Mira Sorvino plays Meg Coburn, a document forger who finds herself caught up in the film's events early on, and instead of hiding in the corner and shrieking, picks up a gun and helps John fight off the bad guys. Fun fact, Sorvino speaks Mandarin and helped Chow-Yun-Fat with his English during filming. Michael Mary Poppins Rooker
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all!
plays Stan Zikov, the detective who sets off the story's events by making Wei's son into a good gangster. While I do buy him as a cop, he's not given much to do, which is a real shame. Kenneth Tsang, who also starred alongside Chow-Yun-Fat in the first two A Better Tomorrow films, The Killer and Once a Thief, plays Terrence Wei, who is basic action movie bad guy who's smart enough to know exactly what he's up against, yet stupid enough to keep throwing henchmen at our intrepid hero. Jurgen Prochnow plays Wei's second-in-command, Mr. Kogan, basic action movie bad guy number 2. Clifton Collins Jr., credited in the movie as Clifton Gonzalez Gonzalez, plays Loco, who used to have a relationship with Meg, and he's just here to be a grating sleaze for a couple of scenes. And Danny Trejo and Til Schweiger play two hitmen whom are not named in the film, but IMDb informs me are named Collins and Riker. They're two killers Wei calls in to replace John, the titular replacement killers. Cold and calculating, but criminally underused. The final verdict on the replacement killers? By the director's cut.